We're kicking it right off with Kim Rasmussen. Give me a hand, guys.
Thank you, thank you. Hopefully this will be fine, I guess, so I don't have to carry it around, or maybe not. So yeah, this talk is about FreeIPA. It's Identity and Access Management System for Linux. It has many names. It has now been renamed to Red Hat Identity Management or some glorious things like that. So our brief agenda for today, if I'm standing in front of the screen, just indicate that I should move. It's fine. So brief introduction, some introduction to the identity management. It's basically the same as you would guess. And then some key points, policy, two-factor authentication, host-based access control, and maybe a little demo of the Sudo, because I didn't have time to include it. And then a few things about trust. What? Oh, yeah, sorry. Sånn? Er det bedre? I don't know. Yes. So let's get the ball rolling with what is FreeIPA. So FreeIPA is a tool built upon known and quite standard packages for Linux, already having great documentation to provide identity, policy, and trust. So the heaviest of packages are the ones that are linked here, where you have dog tags for PKI, Kerberos for, well, Kerberos. You have Crony for the NTP server. If you are running this on a physical host, it makes sense to have. If it's a virtual one, you don't want to be running an NTP server for obvious reasons. You have 386 directory servers. And you got bind for DNS. So this bind actually comes with DNSSEC, and IPA comes with DNSSEC pre-enabled. And it does for every enrolled client into IPA, it does create the SSH fingerprints within the DNS. So you don't actually have to accept the fingerprint while you SSH to it for the first time. Other than that, IPA is kind of scalable and robust in the manner that you can have what is called a replica, which is basically just another IPA server that communicates to the one you set up previous, and then it just transfers all of the records and states. So it does that between all of these things. So that's nice. Which also means that IPA also supports the, well, Microsoft calls it sites. IPA calls it locations, so you can split them up. So if you have, let's say, another country, they don't need to access, well, your IPA servers or another office or something. Yes. So, quick introduction. It's fairly easy to set up. Everything that you need to make sure, these boxes are, by the way, terminal output and inputs. Also, they're really hard to see on the screen here, but yeah. Anyway, you need to make sure that your etc host has been updated with the actual IP address of the host that you're installing IPA on, and not the loopback address, because during the IPA server install, it actually does try to resolve your IP address. And if it does that, then it just fails and hits the loopback address. So basically, you run all of these commands. Oh, I pasted twice. Never mind. You only need to run the yum install once. Yeah, then you get an interactive terminal where you enter all of your desired domain specific things, and it's up and running. And then you will have to provide it with 2 passwords, one for the actual administrator, which is called admin, and one for a service user called directory server. And the directory server is used for bootstrapping your PKI. So if you forget that password, which you don't use that many times, you're gonna have a hard time, like really a hard time. Without that, you're kind of screwed while setting up a new LDAP server or a replica, and so on. So all of the passwords you provide LDAP, note it down, put it somewhere safe, preferably not on your keyboard. And then for the client, you basically just ensure that the resolve conf is updated with the DNS server that comes along with the IPA server. And then you run IPA install client, and it will automatically just figure out the domain credentials. And then you have to provide your admin and authenticate for it to actually enroll. Yeah. Going on to how to create users, I should probably mention that IPA has like 3 ways of interacting with it. You have the CLI, you have the web interface, and then you have the RESTful API. Yeah. So in this slide, it's mostly CLI based because it looks pretty. So this is how you add a user account. So it's basically almost the same as every other user, any other LDAP system, right? But IPA has some cool things, mainly. Oh, that sucks. I have to scroll down again. Mainly that it has this field that you can put your SSH pub key in, and that will then be used by all of the clients to look up in a table to see if that that your private key is matching the public key stored in IPA. So you can actually use that instead of passwords while authenticating using SSH. Yeah, and for groups, this is a regular POSIX group. So first you create the group, that's the first command. Then you add members to the group. And of course it says users, which means that you should actually just repeat the parameter multiple times rather than comma separating users, right? Because that makes sense. But yeah. And for the users, there are different groups. For user groups, there are basically POSIX or non-POSIX. So this means it's marked as external in the web interface. You will see why there is an external group soon. And then you have a regular, like a lookup table or something for a set of hosts. This is not any POSIX group or anything like that, but it's later being used in the host-based access control. Yeah. So, IPA actually comes with two-factor authentication. There are certain settings that you can do for this demonstration purposes. I just went with the default ones that shows up when you just say what you want. And basically that algorithm is SHA-1. Not that great. But also it gave me a QR code in the terminal, which was nice. And it also gives you the OTP off token as well. Which all of this is for demonstration purposes, so I don't care if it says secret. This environment is going to die after this talk. Yes. So yeah, with the OTP, you can actually have two-factor authentication on SSH. So it will actually ask you for the first sequence, which is your password, and then the OTP, which is then the Google Authenticator thing, or free OTP if you are using that. Yes, onward to the awesome thing, which I'm going to have to scroll through because this is long. So host-based authentication. Basically what this means is it's a policy which says either a group or a user can be allowed to access a service on a set of hosts, either by explicitly saying which host it should use in the HBAC, or which host group it should be using. In this example, it's using one host and one user. So first I'm creating a HBAC rule called access to top. This is now a blank, but it's enabled. Secondly, we want to add a server onto this. So then we actually add the -- well, we change the command, so it's now HBAC rule add hosts, and then the name of the rule, and then the host that we want to add, and we get a return which says either success or failure. And the next one, which is the add the user. So now you can also see and confirm that it has been added to the correct HBAC group, since it's also displaying which host the user should have access to. And then, since I'm lazy, I'm just adding a service category, which is all. So this includes SSH. Next, we then verify that our user can actually SSH. And we don't need to actually use the user account to verify this. We can actually use the IPA HPA test, which then will match which rule, if it's true or false. So here you can see that it matched the access to top, but the other says it doesn't match. So our user should have access to that host. So I mentioned trust. So IPA actually has the ability to trust Active Directory. And this means that that users can exist in Active Directory and being and have access management in IPA, which means that probably many Windows administrators would be super happy since they don't have to deal with trying other solutions on Linux, or having you doing this. So basically, in order for this to work, both domains, or both AD and IPA, needs to be able to access each other's service records for LDAP TCP. And then once that is done, then you can go ahead and run the commands, just change whatever you need as the NetBIOS name and so on. And it's all interactive, and it will prompt you where it needs you to take decisions. And once that is done, you can verify that you have a trust with the get and possibly the administrator at the domain. If you don't get a feed or any return, it means that your trust doesn't work. But trust means also that host-based access control is done a bit differently, or not actually host-based access control, but the groups, because you need to actually create what is called an external mapping. And then once you create the external group, which is marked by external and not postfix, which is the default one, then you can add the, oh wait, I will scroll a bit more so you might see it. Then you can add the members, which is the NetBIOS name dash group in Active Directory to it. And you will see that it has been added, and you get the external member with the S11520, some other unique identifier from Windows. Once that is done, you actually need to add a postfix group. So you create a postfix group, you call it now without the underscore ext for external. Then, once that is done, you basically add the external group as a member of the postfix group, and that way the postfix groups, like you might have seen it, but the external one didn't have a GID, but now they both should have GIDs, or what actually should happen is that the users that are external will get mapped to the postfix group and then get the corresponding GID from that postfix group. Yes. And once you have done this, then your user can, or this postfix group can now be added onto a host-based access control group, or role, or whatever you call it. And then all of the Active Directory users can then SSH to that system. And you can use that group in the future in both host-based access control and in the Sudo way to manage Sudo rules. So, I don't know how much time I've spent. Yeah. almost. I have like 5 minutes or something left. So basically, why do you want to use FreeIPA? Well, it's good if you have too many users that you want to have control over and they shouldn't access all of the servers. Or you have too many servers that you want to have a fixed UID for, or GID. Or you got a mixed environment and you want to have single user accounts across your environment. This also includes when the trust is open, you can actually change your password on Linux and then it will be reflected in Active Directory. Yeah, and once you're logged into one of the Linux servers, you have single sign-on everywhere because of Kerberos. Yeah, more or less. Since I basically have, what, 4 minutes left, I can show you the interface, which looks like this. And then you have the policy tab. You have many more things that I haven't talked about. And it's fairly documented. So in the Sudo rules, you can just add a Sudo rule. So, oh, come on. And then in this, you just go through who needs access to which host to run which commands. And then you also have a one, who should they run a command as? And so on and so on. If you need the Sudo rules or Sudo commands to be authenticated, meaning you don't require password, you have to use the exclamation mark authenticate, I think, authenticate or authentication. Don't really, yeah, but you basically use it as a way to say not true. Yeah. I think we probably need any questions? Yes. Thank you. Because I can't see shit. Oh no. Oh no.
So, how is FreeIPA to work with, to upgrade it, and like how do you like it to work with it? Is it nice?
Okay, so there was one thing I didn't mention, and
Repeat the question first, please.
okay, so the question was how is it to work with, upgrade, and so on. The thing is that FreeIPA is awesome when it works, less awesome when it doesn't, because by default it doesn't come with any, what can I say, any logs enabled, except for the directory server. So if Kerberos start acting up, or the replica server can't access the CA to actually get a new certificate, because it uses certificates to communicate with each other to be able to update the information that it needs to update. When that fails, you kind of have to do the little trick going back in time by just setting the OS clock and go, can I have a certificate? Now it's valid. And you need to do that on both. So yeah, other than that, the worst part is not actually IPA itself, it's the SSSD. That program cannot manage cache for shit, meaning that it says in the documentation that you can use like capital E and type username, and it will empty the cache for the user. Never worked, in my experience. So you basically end up stopping SSSD, going into a var lib SSS DB, I think it is, or private DB, something like that. That's where it stores the cache, and you just delete everything inside of that folder, and then you restart SSSD, and everything is good. And this also means that SSSD is used for the trust on IPA as well. So if your trust is acting up, you might just want to delete the SSSD cache, and things will work. Was that a good question, answer? Any more? I can't see, so no?
No? All right.
All right.